Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro activated what is known as the integral defense doctrine in response to the threat of aggression by the United States. In Honduras, the Attorney General, Joel Zelaya, announced an investigation against the National Electoral Council for irregularities in the electoral process. Russia and India agreed to increase their trade exchange to an equivalent of $100 billion by 2030. Hello and welcome to From the South, from the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba. My name is Pablo Micheliche. We begin with the news. Stay with us. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro activated what is known as the integral defense doctrine in response to the threat of aggression by the United States. Maduro instructed security forces to study and practice prolonged popular resistance and permanent offensive in the face of Washington's threats in the region. The Venezuelan leader also explained that his model of power is comprehensive and not limited to public institutions, as it involved communal social power and social movements. He also maintained that his government dismantled the main criminal gangs, such as the now defunct Tren de Aragua and Tren del Llano, and offered his security model to neighboring countries. He denounced that the 2015 Opposition National Assembly stole $14 million from bloc accounts to distribute among its leaders.
No one or nothing will take it from us, not today, not ever. Have the certainty, the absolute certainty that no one will take the land or the destiny of the Venezuelan people. Sacred land, sacred destiny.
Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro affirmed that at present the nation had the most advanced police and security system in all its history.
Today, December 5th of 2025, I can say to Commander Chavez, wherever he is watching us today, we have the police system and of public security more complete and advanced of all of the history of the Republic in Venezuela and all of the historical times of the Bolivarian Revolution, thanks to you. Police of the homeland, thanks to you.
The National Bolivarian Armed Forces of Venezuela, as part of Operation Bolivarian Shield 2025, detected and intercepted an aircraft without an identification code heading west of the country. The Commander-in-Chief of the Bolivarian National Armed Forces, Domingo Antonio Hernandez Lares, reported that the aircraft was detected in the territory of Ready No. 3, Los Llanos, in the state of Apure. Hernandez emphasized that the appropriate legal verifications were made to control the information and that it was a two-engine Cessna 310 aircraft without a visible registration number, which did not comply with the protocols established by the Law on Control for the Integral Defense of Venezuelan Airspace. In this regard, they ordered a forced landing in the municipality of Pedro Camejo in the state of Apure to immobilize it on the ground. The Belgian network of intellectuals and artists in defense of humanity rejected the military threats carried out by the United States government against the Caribbean region, especially Venezuela. In a statement, they declared the United States is preparing a military escalation against Venezuela in the name of the war on drugs. Off the Venezuelan coast lies part of the U.S. war fleet, including the world's largest aircraft carrier and a nuclear submarine. 10,000 troops are ready to attack. Meanwhile, nearly 100 people have been killed by the bombing of what the United States calls drug ships without providing the slightest evidence. Furthermore, they stated it is evident that Trump and his administration are not concerned about either drug trafficking or democracy. The military escalation is part of the reconquest of Latin America as their colonial backyard. More specifically, they want access to Venezuela's oil and gas reserves and the rare earth metals found in its subsoil. The Colombian government issued a strong warning to the international community, rejecting any attempt to use foreign military force on its territory without its explicit consent. Foreign Minister Rosa Yolanda Villavicencio asserted that such an action would constitute a direct violation of the Charter of the United Nations and the principles that guarantee global stability. Villavicencio also expressed her country's growing concern about the normalization of unauthorized extraterritorial interventions, recalling that these actions have already caused casualties in recent months in areas of the Caribbean and the Pacific. The Colombian Foreign Minister emphasized that respect for sovereignty and the peaceful resolution of disputes are not mere courtesy, but binding obligations for all states. Furthermore, she defended Colombia's track record on the fight against drug trafficking, an effort she described it as rigorous and based on cooperation, and that none of these can justify threats or interference that contradict international law.
On behalf of the government and people of Colombia, I firmly and categorically reject any suggestion of using military force within Colombian territory, under any pretext whatsoever. No state may carry out armed operations in the territory of another state without its express consent. Such action would directly violate the Charter of the United Nations and the fundamental principles that sustain international peace and stability. Colombia observes with deep concern the growing normalization of unauthorized extraterritorial operations, which have left dozens of victims in the Caribbean and the Pacific. These actions erode the international legal order and set a dangerous precedent in a region recognized as a zone of peace.
And now we have a short break coming up. First, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English. We will find news in different formats, news update, and much more. We will be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Chile, the labor code allows the mass dismissal of workers for company-related reasons. And it's not just a lot in a single holding. There have already been 1,000 layoffs. Our correspondent Paula Dragni with more details.
No hay ambiente navideño aquí.
There's no Christmas spirit here. Any of these workers could be next. Mass layoffs are a reality in one of Chile's most powerful holdings, Cencosud, whose corporate tower rises almost like a skyscraper in Santiago. In just the first half of this year, the supermarket chain Jumbo recorded profits of more than 180%.
Por más de 180%.
This represents profits of nearly 200 billion pesos. It makes no sense or logic to apply the article on needs of the company for this number of layoffs.
Ya van 1,000 los que han sido
Already
despedidos.
1,000 have been dismissed for company-related reasons. It's an article of the Labor Code that authorizes the dismissal of workers without further explanation.
Sin mayores explicaciones.
This article is absolutely backward, since it has existed since 1981 as part of José Pinera's Labor Plan, a labor code, also created under dictatorship. It is time to change it. More than 40 years cannot have passed, and we still continue with a labor code, whose framework was made under dictatorship.
Fue justamente en dictadura cuando
It was precisely during the dictatorship when its founder, the controversial German migrant Horst Paulmann, consolidated his fortune. In July 2024, he gave this improvised interview to small entrepreneur François Puzet.
So here too is the call, and for the workers of Chile to think very carefully when it comes time to vote. We find it quite contradictory that workers are voting for our executioners.
Pero no están contentos.
But they are not happy, despite the fact that at the magnate's funeral in March of this year, those now called collaborators took part in the cortege. Perhaps this is one of the main problems. Chilean neoliberalism diluted the working class consciousness.
La conciencia de clase trabajadora.
Yo creo que ante el temor de perder la pega,
I believe that out of fear of losing their jobs, people are protesting very little. I feel there is a fear of confronting the boss. I believe that we, the workers,
Los trabajadores y las trabajadoras somos los ausentes en las calles. No son los
Are the
trabajadores.
ones absent from the streets. It is not the workers themselves. With this flag as a class present in the march, on Women's Day, or mostly not even on May 1st.
Mayoritariamente tampoco el 1 de mayo.
Para la central clasista es
For the
clave
classist central, it is key to take up this idea that is not just theory.
¿Cuánto de esos trabajadores
How many of those workers who mourn Pullman are today without a job?
trabajo?
Para todos los que viven de un
For all those who live off a salary, for all those whose lives are thrown into disorder when that salary doesn't arrive, no matter if they earn the minimum wage or 4 million pesos, because at the level things are, it affects you just the same. To recognize oneself as part of a class, the working class, we are the ones who produce the wealth. If tomorrow we don't get up and go to work, we are the ones who move the factories, and the owners of the factories, of the companies, don't need us.
de las empresas no necesitan a nosotros.
Pero hasta el momento ni el holding ni
But
las
up to now, neither the holding company nor the associated businesses carrying out the mass layoffs have made contact with the unions. Electoral Times.
electorales.
Así que también hay el llamado a la y los trabajadores de...
So here too is the call, and for the workers of Chile to think very carefully when it comes time to vote. We find it quite contradictory that workers are voting for our executioners.
Votando por nuestros verdugos hoy día.
En las urnas, este próximo
At the
14
ballot boxes this coming December 14th, the workers too will have their say.
tendrán la palabra. Carolina Sandoval y Paola Dragnik, teleSUR, Chile.
In Honduras, the Attorney General Joel Zelaya announced an investigation against the National Electoral Council for irregularities in the electoral process. According to the instruction of the Attorney General, he has ordered the Technical and Criminal Investigation Agency to immediately enter the headquarters of the electoral body to collect evidence, documents, and all the necessary material required by his office. While the country continues to await definitive results, the prosecutor has requested all these materials to investigate the numerous complaints of conspiracy, extortion, as well as the accusations made by 3 members of the National Electoral Council who, in the words of the prosecutor, are not fulfilling the interest of Honduras. A U.S. judge ordered Friday to unseal the grand jury transcripts of the Epstein case in Florida. The court order was in response to a request made by the Department of Justice itself to declassify the case files. The department had renewed its request for the material to be made public last month after Congress passed and President Trump signed a law requiring the Attorney General to disclose records related to the investigation. The order is a significant legal turn of events, as the same court had rejected similar requests in 2005 and 2007, arguing the need to maintain the secrecy of grand jury deliberations. Multimillionaire Jeffrey Epstein was found dead in his cell in 2019 while awaiting trial for running a sophisticated network of child sex trafficking and abuse. In other news, the leaders of the United States, Canada, and Mexico held a private meeting after the 2026 World Cup draw and reaffirmed their intention to continue collaborating on trade issues amid growing tensions in the region. The meeting that took place at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. lasted approximately 45 minutes, where they addressed economic cooperation, border security, and coordination for the organization of the event. All the relations have been strained by economic, immigration, and anti-drug trafficking policies. The governments have reached agreements and extensions on tariffs. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is seeking to reestablish bilateral dialogue with the United States after a period of tension which led to the suspension of trade negotiations last October. In a message posted on social media, Sheinbaum added that they agreed to continue working together on trade issues. And we have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you will be able to watch our top stories, special live coverage, and much more. Follow our page and activate the notification button to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Fun short break, don't go away. Welcome back. Russia and India agreed to increase their trade exchange to an equivalent of $100 billion by 2030. The agreement took place during President Vladimir Putin's official visit to New Delhi, where the Russian leader affirmed that trade between both nations continued to grow at a steady pace, reaching record-breaking results. Putin also highlighted the potential investment opportunities offered by India and informed that the trade exchange between them exceeded $64 billion in 2024. The delegations from both countries met Friday to conduct formal negotiations in small and large groups. Israeli occupation forces arrested about 570 Palestinians in November in the occupied West Bank territories. In a statement, the Palestinian Center for Studies on Prisoners reported that among the 570 detainees, there are about 8 women and at least 41 minors. The institution also highlighted that since October 2023, the Israeli regime has detained more than 21,000 Palestinians in the West Bank. In this scenario, the Palestinian people and human rights groups asserted that arbitrary and administrative detentions violate due process of law by not allowing the presentation of evidence without the possibility of being tried or convicted.
The Israeli raids happen every day, but this time it lasted longer. Every day, when I go to dawn prayer, I find the Israeli soldiers right in my face. They don't distinguish between good and bad, or old and young. Everyone is treated the same. Provocation and humiliation, that is their policy. I tell them I am elderly, but they make no distinction between old and young. Everyone is treated the same. They tell me, raise your hands and spread your legs, then they beat and humiliate.
Israel carried out new attacks against residential areas in southern Lebanon, increasing tensions and regional instability despite the ceasefire agreement. These assaults were carried out after prior threats from Israel, which forced the Lebanese to evacuate several towns in the southern border region. Authorities reported that these Israeli attacks caused considerable damage to buildings and civilian homes, but no casualties or injuries were reported. Additionally, they asserted that these actions by Israel represent a flagrant disregard for international agreements and the ceasefire declaration that came into effect on November 27, 2024. Until November 2025, Israel committed over 5,000 violations of the ceasefire, resulting in 309 deaths, 598 injuries, and structural damage. Pakistan and Afghanistan exchanged heavy fire along their border late on Friday, officials from both countries reported. Afghan Taliban spokesman Zabihullah Mujahid said that Pakistani forces launched attacks in a district of Kandahar province. For his part, a spokesman for Pakistan's Prime Minister accused Afghan forces of unprovoked firing along the Shaman border. The exchange came 2 days after a new round of peace talks between the South Asian neighbors ended without a breakthrough. Ali Mohammad Hakmal, head of Kandahar's information department, reported that Pakistani forces attacked with light and heavy artillery and that mortar fire had struck civilian homes, adding that the clashes ended as both sides agreed to stop. In Sri Lanka, the toll from adverse weather caused by Cyclone Ditwa has risen to 607 deaths and at least 214 missing. According to the country's Disaster Management Center, the atmospheric phenomenon and its remnants have affected more than 2 million people nationwide. 4,164 houses have been destroyed and around 67,500 others have suffered partial damage. In this regard, the Meteorological Department states that in the coming days an increase in rainfall is expected in some parts of the country due to the monsoon effects in the region, and urge the population to maintain safety measures, limit interstate travel, and stock up on basic supplies to minimize unnecessary trips outside the home. And in South Africa, a new study shows that the African penguin population has collapsed due to mass starvation. A study published in Austria's Journal of African Ornithology reveals that more than 60,000 penguins from colonies along South Africa's west coast have perished as their main food source has dwindled. More than 95% of the birds vanished between 2004 and 2012, with researchers concluding that the vast majority likely succumbed to hunger. The study points to shifting ocean conditions and depleted fish stocks as the main causes. It is important to highlight that the African penguins were formally listed as critically endangered in 2024, with fewer than 10,000 breeding pairs remaining. With the information, we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and you can also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram and TikTok. For Telesur English, my name is Pablo Micheliche. Thank you for watching.